Stranded in the haunted Texas Tower 4 where the missing never come back. I never should have opened that door. The moment my hand touched the cold doorknob, a chill ran down my spine, a premonition, a warning. But curiosity had a grip on me, squeezing tighter than the darkness that enveloped this place. My mornings were usually quiet. I had my coffee, read the news, and planned the day. But now, I was here. In this building. The air was stagnant, thick with secrets. It smelled like dampness and decay. Shadows danced across the walls, whispering tales of those who vanished. I shivered as I stepped deeper inside. The tower loomed above me, a towering ghost obscured by clouds. Windows cracked and brittle held back memories, heavy with despair. Each step echoed a reminder I was not alone. The sound bounced back, multiplying my fear. I could hear whispers now, soft and sinister, wrapping around me like a cloak. From the corner of my eye, something moved. A flicker of movement, just a shadow fleeting across the threshold. My heart raced, panic echoing in my chest. I pressed forward, driven by a mix of dread and undeniable intrigue. I was drawn to the unknown. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from above. My blood froze. I felt it, hairs on my neck standing up. There was a presence. I wasn't welcome here. I could feel it in the cold creeping up my arms, the whispers growing more urgent, more frantic. I stumbled, almost losing my footing as I turned back. A picture frame on the wall rattled. The glass cracked, a line splicing through the smile of a face once unbothered. I could taste the fear now, metallic and bitter, thick on my tongue. The air felt charged, electric, filled with something otherworldly. Breath quickening, I glanced around. Shadows clung to the corners, alive with malice. And then, I saw it. A figure, barely formed, just beyond my reach. It lingered in a half-light, watching. I didn't breathe. I cooned, frozen by the icy grip of terror. I turned to run, but before I could, the door slammed shut behind me. The sound was deafening, an ending before the end. I screamed, then all went silence. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. Panic surged through my body as I slumped against the door, the weight of the closed portal pressing against me like a tombstone. The silence that followed my scream was oppressive, saturated with an eerie sense of anticipation. I could still feel the gaze of the figure, an uninvited guest who had not taken form yet but had already imprinted its malice on my skin. The whispers returned, more insistent this time, as if they sensed my fear and thrived on it. They intertwisted, creating a sickly sweet murmur, taunting me with promises of truth from the shadows. Every breath felt like a mistake, each heartbeat a countdown to something inevitable that I dared to glance back at the space I had just been drawn into. The darkness shifted, swirling like a storm, creating shapes that teased the edges of my understanding. The figure remained, flickering at the fringes, its presence so heavy I could almost touch it. I turned to the door, desperation coursing through me. My hands, trembling with dread, fumbled with the doorknob, seeking freedom, but the doorknob was unyielding, a mocking metal that refused to cooperate. I tugged and twisted until my fingers screamed in protest, but the door stayed firm, a seal locking away my escape. I was trapped. The realization struck with the force of a cold slap. I was ensnared in the bowels of a tower that feasted on fear. In the dim light, the shape flickered forward, morphing into something grotesque, a fusion of shadow and despair, sallow skin stretched over a gaping maw. Everything in me screamed to look away, but an unnerving compulsion held me transfixed. The figure seemed to smile, the edges of its mouth curling in a rictus that promised horrific secrets yet to unfold. Suddenly, the electricity in the air crackled, then vanished, plunging me into an even deeper darkness. My heart thundered in my chest, drowning out the whispers, which now sounded like muffled cries echoing through time. Panic erupted anew as I fumbled for my phone, desperate for a flicker of light. As the screen illuminated, its glow illuminated a haunting sight. In the corner the walls were covered in frantic scrawlings, desperate messages from countless souls who had wandered these halls before me. Get out. One message screamed in frantic ink. They are watching. Another warned tantalizingly, your curse is just beginning. I was tethered in place, the hairs on my arms standing on end, each scrawl resonating with a horrifying familiarity that sent shivers cascading down my spine. It was then that I felt a cold breath against my neck, causing me to freeze in place, paralyzed by terror. Oh God, I was not alone. The figure had stepped closer, drawn by the warmth of my fear. I could feel its cold presence radiating behind me, a weight like a warning. An invisible hand traced along my neck, and I swallowed the lump of dread that had risen in my throat. Before I could react, the whispers crescendoed into a cacophony, layering over one another, translating their chaos into a singular, deafening command, join us. With a primal instinct, I turned to face it, my heart pounding against my ribcage. But as I turned, I felt something slip beneath me, a hand, cold and claw-like, breaking the surface of the shadows. I could hardly process what was happening when the floor beneath me trembled, shuddering as if something great and terrible was awakening deep within the tower's foundation. The walls began to warp, the once stable structure contorting as if the tower itself sought to claim me. In a frantic rush, I lunged towards the nearest cracked window, stumbling over the tenuous boundary between life and the void beyond. Grasping hold of a splintered board, I pulled with all my strength, gasping for breath, but just as my fingers touched the ledge, the shadows converged, swirling violently like a tempest. That a chilling laughter erupted around me, sending terror coursing through my veins. And when I glanced behind me, the figure had transformed fully, its features grotesque, eyes like black pits filled with an insatiable hunger. My heart stopped as it advanced. Every shadow pooling at its feet, fusing and expanding, ready to engulf me whole. In that moment, I realized I was not just a guest in this haunted tower, I was its prey, a sacrifice to an ancient appetite. With a final surge of adrenaline, I hurled myself at the window, determined to shatter the veil of darkness that sought to consume me. And just as I broke through the glass, something unexpected pulled me back. A tendril of shadow lashed out, wrapping around my ankle with an iron grip. As the shards fell around me, I screamed, the world turning upside down, torn between the blinding light of freedom and the ravenous darkness beneath. And then, all went black. When I came to, I was no longer in the tower but sprawled on the damp ground, my body aching as though I had been ripped from one realm and unceremoniously tossed into another. The air was thick and cold, wrapping around me like an unseen shroud. My heart pounded, echoing in the silence that surrounded me, a relentless reminder that I was somewhere far removed from safety. I lay there, disoriented, struggling to gather my thoughts through the fog of panic that lingered at the edges of my consciousness. My fingers grazed the ground, and I recoiled at the sensation. It felt like flesh, warm and pulsating beneath my touch. I pinched my eyes shut, fighting against the wave of nausea threatening to overwhelm me. When I dared to open them, I was confronted by the sight of an expanse stretching before me, a cavern lined with earthen walls that shimmered wetly like the insides of a beast. Whispers coiled around me, a low, almost melodic murmur that seemed to respond to the rhythm of my heartbeat, each pulse inviting them closer. You are here now, they cooed. Welcome to the depth of your fears. I scrambled to my feet, disoriented but weaponized with panic. My breath came in sharp gasps as I turned, and there was again the figure, standing at the edge of the darkness, shrouded in gloom deeper than the void itself. Those haunting black pits for eyes were now twin abysses, pulling me, drawing my fear into them. I forced myself to move, fleeing down a tunnel that twisted and turned, mocking my desperate need to escape. As I ran, I tripped over something large and solid hidden beneath the earth, a stone, rough and jagged. I stumbled to a stop, panting heavily, and glanced down. The stone was unlike anything I had ever seen, it pulsed with a faint light, rhythm syncopating with my own heartbeats. Unearthly glyphs carved its surface, shimmering almost enticingly in the dimness, hinting at some ancient power. I could feel the whispers growing louder, urging me to seize this fragment from the dark. My fingers brushed against its surface, and an electric shock coursed through me as if the stone recognized my touch, but just as I began to feel an odd connection, the shadows surged behind me, rolling in like an encroaching tide. My instincts screamed to run, but I felt a pull towards the stony, a connection that felt too potent to snub. I hesitated, straddling a chasm of dread and intrigue. Join us. The figure's voice hissed, reverberating through the tunnel, sharp and predatory. It was both a command and a plea, as if it had been starved of souls for too long. I torn myself from the grip of curiosity, clutching the stone in my hand like a talisman of hope. The growing fear twisted tight around my heart, compressing it with every fleeting second that I turned to continue my escape, but that's when I felt an agonizing pull at my core, as though every ounce of my being yearned back to that primal voice, to the figure that prowled behind me. My feet moved on their own accord, mixing with the rhythm of whispered promises, the ground itself beckoning me to abandon reason. The very air thickened with malevolence, causing shivers to cascade down my spine. Shadows twisted and pulsed, reaching out, and just as I thought I could forge my own path through this suffocating darkness, my foot caught against something slick and yielding. I fell to the ground with an echoing thud, the stone clattering out of my hand, and then I understood, as I stole a glance around. I was not alone in the cavern. Twisted shapes took form all around me, figures of once living souls, their faces a grotesque melding of anguish and despair, forever trapped between this world and the next. They reached for me with outstretched hands, mouths opening in silent screams as they pulled themselves closer, merging with the shadows that danced hungrily around me. The darkness surged, and I felt the tendrils wrap around my legs, seeping into my very essence, pulling me toward the abyss. I fought back, clawing at the earth beneath me, still desperate for freedom. I reached for the stone, but it was gone, lost among the twisting hands of countless lost souls. In that moment, the grasping shadows seemed to separate, revealing the path to an exit, a shred of light flickering through the dark. But as I surged forward toward the light, the air split with a chilling scream, my heart sank. That voice, thin and quaking, was mine. It echoed back, a haunting reminder that perhaps I was meant to be one of them, forever lost. My breath caught in my throat as I realized, with horrifying clarity, that the light was retreating, and darkness was advancing. I was not alone in my terror. They clamored for me, embraced by their unholy love, pillaging the remnants of my will. And as the shadows threatened to pull me under, I saw a figure, now fully formed, standing at the threshold of the light, its landscape of darkness yawning wide, hungry and wretched. I barely caught a glimpse of the simpering smile before I was swallowed whole. Just as the darkness enveloped me, I sensed another presence, something ancient, slithering in the depth of the cave. It began to hum, a melodic chant that twisted through the veil of despair, blending with my lost scream. Despair transformed abruptly into something worse, awakening an even deeper terror within me. As the shadows bled into me, I was suspended in a singular moment, balanced on the precipice of what lay beyond. The chanting grew louder, a throbbing beat that synchronized with my own heart, as the world blurred around me. Then, with a deafening crash, a fragment of wall crumbled just beside me, revealing twisting tunnels forged by desperation and madness. It dawned on me, the tower was alive. And in that moment, I understood the missing never truly left. They transformed, evolving into something far more horrific than I could have ever imagined. And as the shadows began to weave into the very fabric of my being, I desperately fought to remember who I was, who I had been, before eternity claimed me. But then, the figure turned its gaze towards me once more, and I felt tendrils of ice wrap around my heart. Its gaping maw opened wider, revealing everything I feared was true. And that's when the walls of the cavern began to tremble. An ominous growl echoed through the darkness, and I realized this wasn't just a place, it was a living entity, and it was hungry. The growling pulsated through the cavern like the beating of a colossal heart, resonating in my bones. It was a sound that promised no salvation, only endless hunger. As I lay trapped in the grip of panic, watching the figure linger on the edge of that flickering light, I could feel its presence churning with malevolence, a predator poised to feast. The walls of the cavern writhed, and I could almost see the shadows coalescing, becoming more than just silhouettes. They became faces, distorted and racked with torment. Uncountable eyes blinked back at me from within the darkness, marking me as their next target, their most recent possession. I had been too slow, too weak in my resolve, and now the tower had decided my fate. Embrace your fear, a voice gutted from the shadows hissed. The words slithered into my ears, wrapping around my thoughts like a serpent. You will find your place among us, and the void shall fill your soul with delight. The air thickened, and I could no longer separate the whispers from my own thoughts. It felt as though the darkness itself was seeping in, corrupting my mind, weaving my consciousness into its ghastly tapestry. The walls leaned close, pressing down on me like the torso of a great beast, its breath a rancid wind. As I lay frozen, I could feel the cruel pulse of the cavern's walls synchronizing with the chaotic rhythm of my heart. Shadows began to swirl frantically, and the growl intensified, morphing into a monstrous chorus of voices entreating me to join them. You must give in. Surrender to the infinite, they echoed, each voice filled with despair yet tantalizingly inviting. My instincts screamed for me to rise, to escape this dark embrace, but the shadows were persuasive, their promises threading through my veins like venom. Driven by my will to survive, I clawed my way back to my feet, my every limb feeling heavy with dread. Just as I threatened to slip into the depths of madness, I noticed something glimmering at the edge of my periphery. A figure, still cloaked in shadow, watched from the recesses. Their features melded into grotesque forms, countless faces bleeding into one, embodying centuries of lost souls. It was then that a vision flashed in my mind, a chaotic bazaar, flickering candles casting sickly shadows over faces I once knew. People laughing, unbothered, while the ground beneath them shuddered, a haunting omen that they could not perceive. I was one of them once, filled with careless hope. Yet I could feel their remnants, a part of me that had been forgotten, buried within my own essence. But now, lost in a world that thrived on despair, I was becoming one of those wretched souls, forever tethered to this malevolently sentient tower. I extended a trembling hand towards the glimmering presence, desperate to connect, to be saved from the torment the shadows promised. Help me. My voice cracked, barely audible over the cacophony of whispers. For a moment, the shadows seemed to pause, an unnatural stillness gripping the cavern. Then, the figure stepped into the dwindling light, fully emerging, not a person, but a creature woven from the very fabric of nightmares, its skin a patchwork of flesh and shadow, eyes sparkling with malice. The cries from the walls resonated with 1,000 tormented souls, twisting in unison as a cacophony of anguish picked up once more. No, I whispered, horrified. The realization brought clarity to my fear. The creature was not here to save, might was here to consume what remained of my humanity. I backed away, but the cavern responded, walls flexing and twisting, as if aware of my dread. In that moment of desperation, I braced myself against the flickering light, a fading beacon of my past. But the shadows surged forth, clotting together into a tidal wave of darkness that lunged at me with a single, ravenous intent. Join us. The creature's mouth split, revealing jagged teeth and an impossibly wide grin. The darkness roared in response, a maelstrom of despair twisting eagerly to reach me. I stumbled backward, nearly losing my footing, my heart racing as I searched for an escape. Then, just as the shadows began to engulf me, something inside me snapped. I wouldn't give in. With one desperate lunge, I dove toward the glowing stone, half embedded in the ground where it had fallen when I first stumbled. As my fingers grasped it, a surge of energy coursed through me, illuminating the cavern with a brilliant light that pushed back against the consuming darkness. But the figure wailed, and the creature howled, their anguished cries piercing the air. They recoiled from the light, but it was too late. My spirit ignited with an unshakable force, pushing me forward beyond the shadow's reach. The stone pulsed in my grip, resonating with a power that felt familiar, yet deep down, I realized the truth. The light would not only repel the darkness, it would attract it too. A blinding glow spread outward, and I could see the faces in the cavern's depths shift, merging into one vast, collective mass of tortured souls, their eyes shining like stars, hungry stars, ready to devour. Just then, the very ground trembled beneath me, the cavern roared with fury. The shadows recoiled, swirling to form a grotesque whirlpool, rising violently around the accompanying light. "You will not escape." The figure screeched, its voice melding with the chaotic whispers around me. The last shred of the light bent inward, revealing a rift pulsating with malignant energy. I could feel it beckoning for release, for an end to this horrific masquerade, and I finally understood I was not the only one the tower had claimed. And then, with an earth-shattering crack, the rift began to widen, threatening to consume everything around it. It was a perilous dance on the edge of annihilation, with survival as my only thought. I hurled the stone into the abyss, a final act of defiance, even as the darkness surged toward me, ready to reclaim what was rightfully its own. But as I turned to flee the approaching shadows, I heard a low, sickening chuckle reverberating through the cavern, synchronized with each heartbeat echoing within me. "You've made a grave mistake and now you will understand." In that chilling moment, I felt the ground dissolve beneath my feet, the walls pulsating with life, and all at once, I was standing on the precipice of madness, screaming into nothingness as the hollow tendrils enveloped me once more. As the tendrils dragged me into the abyss, a cacophony of desperate whispers erupted in my ears, each voice filled with agony and twisted yearning. My body felt weightless, suspended between realities, and the sensation was raw terror, an existential dread that threatened to consume my very essence. The shadows pulsated around me with a life of their own, encapsulating my scream within their insidious embrace. With a sudden jolt, I was set down with jarring force upon a ground that felt like flesh. It squirmed beneath me, a living mass that writhed with silent screams. I scrambled to my feet, a myriad of emotions crashing over me like waves: fear, confusion, and an ever-deepening dread. I was no longer in the cavern but in a nightmarish version of the market from my vision, illuminated by sickly yellow light. Faces I once recognized swarmed to me, their eyes wide and frantic, mouths moving soundlessly as if trapped in an unbreakable silence. There was Clara, my childhood friend, her expression frozen in terror, while next to her loomed Mr. Bowers, my old science teacher, now hollow-eyed and gaunt. "Help us!" they mouthed repeatedly, their hands reaching out, yearning for something just beyond my grasp. My heart pounded in response to their suffering. But as I ran towards them, an unseen force jerked me away, pulling me back toward the shadow-soaked edges of this deranged spectacle. "You don't belong here," a voice resonated, not from any visible lips but echoing through the very fabric of this nightmare. "Not yet. Let them go. I can help them." I screamed, desperation curling my voice. "Help." The voice laughed, a sound filled with the echoes of 1,000 tormented souls. "You can only join them. That's the only truth here." As panic surged through my veins, I turned back to the figures, but they were fading, their forms blurring into shadows as the nightmare morphed into an oppressive darkness again. "No." I lunged to reach them, but the ground churned beneath me, pulling at my feet as if it sought to devour me whole. Around me, the marketplace began to shift, fraying at the edges, the happy faces twisting into grotesque caricatures devoid of hope. They began to swirl around me in a dizzying blur, whispering my name, beckoning me to join them in their eternal lament. "Lara," they mumbled together, voices blending into an agonizing symphony. "You'll never escape, you'll never be free, join us." Horror clawed at my throat. I stumbled backward, trying to push them away, trying to block out the cacophony of despair. But with every ounce of willpower I expended to escape, I felt the darkness close in tighter around me, the weight of the tower pressing down on my spirit. Then, to my horror, I felt the ground tremble beneath my feet again, the shadows coiling around me, rising from the earth like living tendrils. Something was being summoned, and I was its Ancora conduit for the unhallowed entities that had long since been forgotten by time. "You brought us here," a hoarse whisper hissed, a chilling intimacy in its tone. "You called us for help, and we answered." In that instant, I realized their faces were not just distorted, they were reflecting pieces of my own fragmented self, the doubts, the regrets, the darkness I had tried to flee throughout my life. They were me, and I was lost among them. "Stop." My voice broke as I fought against the tide of shadows. "I won't be one of you. I want Yet the marketplace twisted and churned as shadows burst forth, laughter rising into a crescendo, echoing off the warped scenery. I was no longer in control, I was but a marionette in this wretched ballet of despair. Each flicker of darkness revealed another ghastly face, former friends, familiar strangers, they all beckoned, craving my surrender. You can't resist us. You don't want to. Let go, but in the deepest recess of my mind, a flicker of determination sparked. I had fought against the dark pulse of the cavern, and maybe, just maybe, there was still something worth saving in me. I reached deep within myself, searching for that last thread of light, that fragile hope that tied me to humanity. And just as the shadows began to envelop me completely, something snapped within the tower itself. The ground shuddered violently, and with a howling snap, reality splintered over the horizon of my vision. I witnessed fragments of the past, the tower's original construction, blood spilled over its stones, unspeakable rituals performed in the depths of its heart. With each vision, I felt threads of history weave into my being. The call of the tower was not just to consume, it was also to hold on, to bring forth those who had suffered and turn their pain into power. The shadows around me writhed, as if echoing that very sentiment, join us. They implored again, their voices now coiling like serpents in my mind, and then I understood this was not just a choice between light and dark. It was a desperate battle for my own soul against an onslaught that could break even the strongest of wills, but just as a decision crystallized in my mind, the ground split open beneath me, and with a last, defiant scream, I plummeted into the darkness or whatever awaited me below. There was no sound, no light, only a descent into hunger and desire, spiraling into the heart of the tower's nightmare where the true meaning of despair awaited, and in that fleeting moment of stark realization, I caught a glimpse of the epitome of horror, myself, twisted and torn, beckoning from the shadows, ready to claim me back into the darkness. As I fell, the sensation of weightlessness swallowed me, propelling me deeper into the abyss that pulsed with ancient malice. The echoes of my scream faded into the void, merging with the perpetual whispers that taunted me from the shadows. It felt interminable, a spiral of darkness that seemed to extend beyond the limits of time itself, the temperature dropping until every breath was a plume of frost suspended in the air. When at last I found solid ground, it was not the flesh-like surfaces I had known. Instead, I landed on a cold, slick stone that thrummed with a life of its own. The dampness clung to my skin like a shroud, and the air around me was thick with a sense of profound malevolence. I rose onto unsteady legs, wiping the cold sweat from my brow, and then froze. Before me lay a vast chamber, illuminated by the sickly glow of phosphorescent fungi that crept up the jagged walls like ghostly stars trapped in a desolate space. The architecture was an aberration, a macabre mix of styles that spoke of ages long lost, a hall of horrors where neither time nor reason held sway. Unfathomable shapes and grotesque figures danced along the edges of my vision, almost familiar yet impossible to grasp fully. That I turned slowly, trying to make sense of the scene, and that's when I saw them, the remnants of lives once lived, now merely shadows of their former selves. Spectres floated through the chamber, caught in an eternal loop of undying sorrow, their mouths stretched in silent screams. Clara's face emerged in the throng, a gaping chasm where her eyes had been, filled only with the reflection of anguish and regret. My heart twisted painfully in my chest, but there was no time to mourn. Lara, her voice drifted through the chamber, a ghostly echo that twisted my gut. And as I turned to flee, another figure stepped from the shadows. Mr. Bowers, his gaunt form now draped in tattered robes that hung like funeral linens over his skeletal frame. He reached towards me, palm open, beckoning me to the soul-crushing void that lay behind him. Don't let them take you, he rasped, his voice an agonized whisper mingling with the air. They want to feast on your fears. The faces of those I had lost swirled around me, their forms coiling like smoke. The old market, now a dreadful tableau, loomed before me, reshaping itself with the scars of despair tattooed across its voluminous walls. The whispers grew louder, forming a collective chant, urging me into a trance. Join us, join us, join us! Panic surged once again, and I sprinted deeper into the chamber, dodging clutches of despair that reached for me like tendrils of smoke. I could hear the echoing footsteps behind me, those phantoms bound to this place, eternally hunting for warmth they would never find. My fingers grazed the slick, cold walls, seeking an escape, a way back to the shred of humanity still clinging to my heart. Suddenly, the ground beneath me trembled violently, and in that moment of instability, a door creaked open at the far end of the chamber. Dread mingled with a sliver of hope as I dashed towards the flickering light that poured through the splintered threshold. But as I neared, a shattering realization struck me that twisted my insides. The moans and shrieks changed pitch, contorting into a sonorous wail that pierced through the air like glass shattering against stone. That I stumbled into the spotlight of the doorway and froze. The corridor ahead split into dozens of paths, each pulsating with its own malevolence. In each passage lay a different nightmare, a reflection of my fierce faces and figures that spoke my name in a chorus of despair, inviting me deeper into the unknown. I turned to flee back into the chamber, but it was no longer there, only an expanse of swirling darkness that clasped and constricted around me like a living being. Shadows slithered across the floor, whispering my name, curling around my ankles, dragging me down toward an inevitable fate. "Join us, Lara," the voices hollowed out, each syllable a dagger to my soul. In that moment of despair, I felt the ground give beneath me. Once more. I fell, grasping desperately, but found nothing to hold on to, only the abyss waiting to swallow me whole. As my hand struck a jagged rock at the bottom of an unseen pit, I braced for impact and opened my eyes to a sight that twisted my heart. A figure cloaked in shadows stood before me, leaning down, revealing the face of myself, contorted in anger and despair. "Welcome home, sister," my doppelganger hissed, lips peeling back to reveal a grin too wide, too hungry. And the last glimmer of hope dimmed into nothingness as the darkness closed in. The chamber shifted, a grotesque mirage of my own existence. The figure mirrored my every movement, each twitch of a muscle reflected with wicked precision. My doppelganger's eyes shimmered like twin voids, empty yet filled with a creeping malevolence, pulling me into a vortex of ruined possibilities. "You've wandered far, haven't you?" it crooned, its voice a searing echo of my own, tainted with venom. Every primal instinct in me screamed to run, to escape from this sinister reflection of everything I dreaded becoming. "What do you want?" I gasped, desperation lacing my voice, yet my heart rang in chorus with the morbid delight coursing through my twin. "Want?" It sneered, tilting its head in mock confusion. "I want what you want, freedom from fear. But you see, only I can achieve that. You are nothing but a fragment of my existence, a shred of light lost in shadows." The air around us thickened, suffocating, wrapping around my throat like a noose, and I choked on my own breath. Before I could respond, the ground warped beneath me again, and in a frenzied panic, I stumbled back, questioning what it meant to be me, to be my own worst enemy. A shudder coursed through the floor as grotesque hands emerged from the darkness, clawing upwards, suffocating embers of hope beneath their fevered grip. Their whispers twisted around the sound of my panicked heartbeat, fusing dread with despair, layering it into a cacophony that threatened to drown me. "Join her," they hissed, their breath a putrid cloud, "and discover the truth. Embrace your darkness." With every ounce of mania rising inside, I bolted past the figure that mimicked me, racing down a corridor berthed in shadows, where the walls seemed to pulse with grief and regret, allowing phantoms of lost souls to surge forth from the stone. Faces swirled in a tide of misery, each was trapped in a moment of anguish, their expressions twisting in loops of suffering too ghastly to bear. Among them danced Clara's visage once more, her hollow eyes now wide with pleading as she reached out, fingers trembling. "This is your creation, Lara," she wailed, her voice a haunting lullaby laced with despair. "You brought us all here. You need to let go." "And no," I stuttered, turning away, fighting against the stone walls that felt alive, bending inwards as though conspiring to draw me back to the incessant pull of grief. "I can't." But the howls of the tortured echoed louder, wrapping tendrils around my mind as if the very fabric of this place fed on my confusion, my self-loathing. The darkness closed in, rising like a tide, unfurling across the space until it slushed like liquid night against my skin. Memory after memory flooded back of Clara, of Mr. Bowers, of moments wreathed in otherworldly light and despair, revealing a truth that snagged sharply in my chest. A mirror loomed before me, first a simple reflecting glass, then it morphed into something much darker. Those submerged secrets that gnawed at my very soul slipped through the veil of the glass as the doppelganger grinned ever wider behind me, promising more than just my reflection, more than I had ever dared to see. You think it's the end here? Oh, no, Lara. This is just the beginning. With a sudden surge of realization, I lunged forward, shattering the surface of the cursed mirror, feeling shards scrape against my fingers. But as I reached through, seeking escape from the malevolence clinging to me, the mirror rippled, distorting the image of my outstretched hand. Fool! My doppelganger shrieked, lunging out as if the very heart of the darkness had unleashed itself upon me. You cannot escape who you are. I was reeling, the cacophony of voices growing louder as the world disintegrated into a web of chaos. I realized too late that the figure had reached me, clutching my wrist with ice-cold fingers that burned like iron, dragging me back. I felt the walls begin to vibrate as darkness swelled, an entity of fractured souls rising to consume everything in its path. Join us, they howled, a shriek that pierced my core. Each syllable was a weight, each breath a plea. Buried beneath their anguish. And just as I was about to shatter beneath the weight of despair, a blinding light burst forth from my palm, scattering the shadows, pulling against the talons of darkness gripping my soul. It tempted the figure of myself, causing it to recoil as if burned, and for a fleeting moment, I glimpsed the other paths branching off behind it, a multitude of worlds, each teetering on the brink of collapse, each holding a piece of my soul. What have you done? My doppelganger howled, rage coursing through it, and suddenly the very air was still, teetering on the edge of destruction. In that moment of precarious balance, the ground beneath me began to fracture, the echoes of strangled cries melding into a crescendo as I felt a split surge of power radiate through me. But before I could seize this moment and harness it, the world imploded into shadows once more. The last thing I saw before it all went black was the glimmering reflection in the shards of shattered glass, 1,000 voices crying out as my own stared back at me, not all of you will return. And then, I fell again, this time searching for ground that may very well be gone forever. As the darkness closed in, I felt the familiar sensation of weightlessness, my body suspended between the realms of being and not being. The lack of gravity wrapped around me like an inescapable blanket, smothering all thoughts, all fears, but also clawing at the edges of my sanity. Then, with a shattering thud, I collided with something dense and unyielding, a void filled with whispers that echoed my name like a litany of despair. Lara, they cooed, a sickly sweet sound that made my skin crawl. Once more, you wander. Struggling against the disorientation, I opened my eyes and found myself not in the corridor of shadow, but in a vast, endless space flickering with glimpses of light. Ghostly forms swarmed around me like lost stars, each fragment of light a flickering memory from my past. Faces I could not fully recall darted in and out of view, their expressions lost to the fog of my mind. They beckoned, their translucent hands reaching out as if eager to pull me into their collective suffering. No. No, I gasped, scrambling back, but my movement appeared futile in this ethereal plane. The memories encroached, invading my consciousness with the force of tidal waves, swelling against my resolve. Suddenly, I remembered a forgotten childhood friend, Sarah, laughing in a sunlit meadow, a stark contrast to the dread that now hung thick in the air. Help us, Lara. She cried out, her voice a broken whisper wrapped in sorrow. You can break free, but before I could respond, the swirling hearts transformed into a vortex, spiraling around me and wrapping me in suffocating tendrils of despair. I felt the edges of my sanity fray as I was pulled deeper into the maelstrom, drawn towards something far darker, a pulsating heart of the tower that seemed alive, a monstrous entity feasting on the anguish of those trapped within its grasp. Feed it your sorrow, the shadows dulcetly intoned, their voices merging into a singular harmony that clawed relentlessly at my mind. It must grow to liberate you. What do you want from me? I cried, my voice cracking as the siren call of their despair threatened to drown me. Phantasmal tendrils wrapped tightly around my legs, and I felt the pulse of the tower beneath. Might's heart was a dark well of untold horrors, a binding contract demanding more than I was willing to give. Your freedom lies buried here, it chuckled, the sound a grotesque symphony of anguished laughter resonating around me. The shadows surged and parted like mist, revealing a grotesque garden of apparitions, twisted trees with faces carved into their bark crying and pleading, laughing then screaming, each filled with sorrow entwined with joy.no. I will not join you. I shouted, attempting to conjure the light once more, the ethereal glow that had flickered in my hand. But as I concentrated, I felt an oppressive weight suffocating my will. The darkness became a sentient wind, an entity that fed on my fear, sowing seeds of doubt within my heart. Your light is weak, the shadows whispered with honeyed tones. You cannot resist. Join the souls tethered to this place. Their power will make you stronger. Images piled onto my consciousness: Clara's pleading eyes, Mr. Bauer's bitter laughter, the faces I failed to save, every failure replayed in a nightmarish loop, haunting my thoughts. Each victim was a tether, wrapped tightly around my heart, imprisoning me within layers of guilt. Lara. Sarah's voice rang clearer than before, a distinct pulse amidst the ethereal din. You are stronger than this. Don't give in. Fight. Those last words tethered to a flicker of resolve within me. The glow in my palm began to respond, a pale light fighting against the encroaching shadows surrounding me. I saw their forms shimmer and convulse as my growing determination clashed against their malevolence, but in that moment, the shadows responded to my defiance with a fury like no other. The tendrils thickened, curling around my throat as a fog of chilling laughter enveloped me. You dare! They screeched, twisting into a torrential cyclone, ripping through the air towards me. The light fluctuated, pulsing faster, dimming as if it were about to be snuffed out completely. No! I won't be dragged into your abyss. I screamed, and with a surge of desperate will, I thrust my hands forward, releasing every ounce of memory and pain into that luminous energy. Suddenly, the world around me erupted into chaos. The shadows lunged, but before they could extinguish the light, it blazed blindingly, breaking through the veil of despair and illuminating all of the horrors that had ensnared me. I began to see it for what it truly was, the essence of my fears laid bare, but then, in the midst of this awakening, I felt a hand grip my shoulder, icy and suffocating. My heart raced as I turned slowly, knowing all too well who or what was behind me. The doppelganger had returned, its smile sinister, mirroring my own horror. You think you can escape me that easily? Where do you think you're going? A sickening dread enveloped me as the shadows surged, twisting in a furious dance around us as reality began to tremble. Just as the ground beneath me ripped apart, revealing fire and darkness below, the very fabric of my existence threatened to unravel, and then silence. The chaos ceased, replaced by a profound stillness that pressed down so heavy I could scarcely breathe. What have you unleashed? My doppelganger whispered, eyes narrowing with a venomous delight, just as the anteroom behind it began to glow, a whole opening to realms unknown. All at once, time froze, a singular moment of clarity amid the cacophony of fear. The portal sparked with unwritten terror, and I knew, with nauseating certainty, that once I stepped through, my destiny would shift irrevocably. Make your choice, it hissed, showing no signs of retreat. Before I could make sense of what lay before me, gentle whispers trailed at the edges of my consciousness, join us, and in that moment, I felt the inexorable tug of the void, promising the one escape I so desperately craved. But it would come at a cost far greater than I could fathom. And as I took a trembling step toward the abyss, it smiled wider, more malevolent than ever before. Then, darkness enveloped me as my foot crossed the threshold, and the world echoed with the sound of shattering glass, releasing a chilling final revelation. Not all who enter will return. As the darkness twisted around me, I felt the weight of its grasp tighten, suffocating and all-consuming. The echoes of shattered glass reverberated through the air, growing into a cacophony of despair. Each shard reflected glimpses of those who had come before me, others trapped in the tower's endless hunger, and I quickly understood, stepping through that portal was not a simple escape. It was an invitation to join a cycle of eternal torment. When I fully crossed the threshold, the ground beneath me morphed, giving way to a landscape that defied comprehension. Jagged peaks of obsidian loomed like teeth, piercing the blood-red sky, while the ground throbbed with a pulse that felt eerily alive. In the distance, I spotted moving shadows, twisted figures writhing against the backdrop. Searing dread pooled in my stomach as I realized these were the souls that had failed to resist. All of you shall bow to the heart of the tower, my doppelganger hissed, now a whisper threading from shadows cloaked in my own shape. All that you have run from is here to embrace you. You will find your way home, dear Lara. The realization that I stood upon sacred ground where countless had perished filled me with dread. I wanted to tear my eyes away from the horrors surrounding me, but I felt myself drawn closer in a magnetic pull, entranced by the haunting cries of those lost. Each step whispered of despair, each heartbeat echoed promises of my own demise. Suddenly, the howls grew louder, and beneath the shadows, glowing eyes emerged, fixating on me, filled with unrelenting hunger. They surged like an angry tide, enveloping me in their desperation, pulling me towards the depths of that monstrous heart. Join us. They beckoned. You belong to us now, neither home nor freedom awaits you. Your fate has been sealed. As they reached for me, fingers like smoke laced with filth and sorrow, I flailed backward, my feet scrambling against the dark soil. But every move felt futile, as though the ground itself was repelling my efforts to escape. I could feel their anguish wrapping around me, drawing me closer to the core of this wretched place, where lamenting souls twisted in a dark dance of mutual suffering, feeding the monster's insatiable appetite. I cried, summoning strength from the flickering light still dimly echoing in my chest. You are not my life. You are my greatest fear. The words barely escaped my lips, trembling yet resolute. For a fleeting moment, the poison of despair receded, and I glimpsed the forgotten friends who once brightened my days. Their faces appeared in the shadow. Sharon, Greg, and even the faint outline of Sarah reached through the desolation, urging me to fight against the tide. The more I focused on their faces, the more the shadows around me throbbed, desperation twisting in their forms. Let us help you, Lara. Sarah's voice rang like a guiding bell amidst the chaos, illuminating the darkness surrounding me with threads of hope. You can find the light. Don't let it devour you. Grasping on to that connection, I lunged forward, straining against the weight of sorrow clinging to my limbs. The darkness shrieked, and for a moment, it felt like the very ground beneath me cracked and splintered. With every ounce of strength I had left, I channeled memories of laughter, smiles, and warmth, igniting a surge in my heart that bloomed like the first breath of dawn after a long night. The veil of shadows hissed and writhed, combustible with fury. No! They screamed in unison, voices blended into a haunting serenade of despair. The world trembled, a violent earthquake splitting the ground beneath them as the doppelganger pointed with a mocking glee. There's no light beyond this. Are you so naive to think you can change your fate, sweet Lara? You will never escape me. In that decisive moment, as I pushed against the torrent of grief, the air thick with their madness and my own fear, I saw a vision and outline of the exit shimmering against the obsidian tower. Euphoria coursed through me. But the shadows lunged, their collective wails growing deafening as they sought to drag me back toward the primal heart of despair. I could feel their fingers clawing at my skin, tearing at my resolve. Lara, be careful. Sarah's voice cut through, a voice of reason amid the raging storm, propelling me outward toward the shimmering exit. But just as hope surged and my feet began to dance towards freedom, a surge of power ripped through the air, sending me sprawling backwards. What? I gasped as the ground erupted beneath me. Before I could comprehend, I felt myself propelled into the air, the horrifying realization striking me like a bolt of frigid steel. There was no exit, only deeper darkness beyond the threshold. Panicking, I spun around, but the ground had transformed, revealing a wicked maw that yawned wide below, a chasm that promised eternal suffering, where souls cried out in a chorus of agony, reaching for salvation that would never come. The illusion of freedom shattered, replaced by a dreadful certainty that I was falling into the abyss, just as my doppelganger's laughter echoed in malicious delight. Welcome home, Lara. The last thing I saw was a swirling void, hungry and endless, as I plummeted, swallowed by the madness beneath. The darkness slammed shut above me with a finality that chilled my bones, and in that dark silence, even the shadows fell silent, watching and waiting. As I drifted in the suffocating void, a surreal calm washed over me, the chaos replaced by an echoing silence. My existence became a nothingness devoid of sensation, a terrifying emptiness that consumed every shred of hope, hope now suffocated by the weight of despair I could not escape. It felt as if I had been absorbed by the very heart of the tower, the relentless thumping echoing in my mind like a death knell, but then, amid the consuming abyss, a flicker caught my attention. The sweet, haunting laughter of a familiar spirit fractured the stillness, resonating deep within my chest. Lara, that voice, like cool water to parched lips, wrapped around my thoughts, familiar yet unsettling. It tugged at me, urging me closer to consciousness, confronting the darkness I clutched so tightly. In despair, with monumental effort, I began to push back against the stagnant weight pressing down, summoning memories from the depths of my mind, laughter, warmth, fleeting moments of joy. As those memories swirled around me, the shadows began to stir once more, mirroring my own anguish. Hungry for the flavor of my desperation, that I in that moment, I understood that I was not alone, not in this dark, insidious realm. With a gasp, I opened my eyes to a chilling sight, a multitude of faces trapped in the dark like I had been, ghostly images suspended in anguish, echoes of the souls I thought I had left behind, each one bearing a tale of sorrow entwined with my very essence. Clara, Mr. Bowers, Sarah, and a multitude of lost souls watched, their expressions wrought with a raw mix of desperation and pleading. That a realization dawned: I was not simply a victim of this torment, I was woven into the very fabric of this nightmare. I had allowed fear to twist me, but what resonated among the souls was not just despair, it was the bonds of shared pain, a collective haunting that offered me power if I could embrace it. That I could feel the shadows creeping closer, urging me to succumb to the despair that had threatened to consume my spirit. But my own voice was rising above the din, demanding to be heard. It echoed through the cacophony, each beat of my heart amplifying the truth I had run from. I had opened the door, but it was not too late to close it. "Stop!" I shouted, my voice shattering the stillness, poignant and defiant. The shadows recoiled as though struck, their thirst for my despair momentarily halted. I turned toward the encroaching mass of souls, recognizing faces that I had once known, their eyes pleading for light. That I, in that brief moment of clarity, I took a step forward, feeling the icy tendrils of darkness withdraw just enough to allow me passage. With conviction, I reached out to the souls around me. "We can fight. We can break free." In response, the air crackled with energy, the shared emotion feeding the pulse of power from the depths of my being. With each word spoken, I saw it, darkness flickered, rhythms of its energy shifting as the souls recognized the spark within me. I was not the only one trapped, I was one among many. As I grasped the tendrils of shadows that constricted around us, I felt the flicker of their hopes and dreams, older than time, ghosts of who they once were, reluctant to believe their fates were sealed. All at once, I unleashed a blast of warmth, channeling everything I could into that suffocating black. Me resolve radiated outward, slicing through the tendrils snaking around me. The shadows shrieked in outrage, fractured images of the suffering faces fading in and out of reality, revealing the tower in its true grotesque form, a monstrous terror that thrived on despair, its heart a twisted orgy of agony and longing. In the chaos, I glimpsed a reflection, me doppelganger, twisted and contorted, no longer a mirror of my fears, but a grotesque manifestation of all that I had fought to silence. It stood before me, fury burning in its depths, eyes filled with venomous rage, and shouted, "You were never meant to escape. This is your home. Embrace the dark." But this time, I would not yield. I turned my gaze back toward the faces of the lost, and in doing so, I felt a rush of solidarity, their hopes entwined with mine. Letting go of fear, I held on to the power we shared. Together, we could ignite a spark to burn through the suffocating darkness binding us. Boundless energy surged through me, twisting and weaving, growing stronger than the consuming shadows. Together, we floated above despair as a blinding light erupted from my core, illuminating the darkness, casting harsh shadows of all who sought to hold us captive. Freedom! I roared, as the shards of anguished souls erupted, consuming the figure of my doppelganger in a burst of blinding brilliance. With one final guttural shriek, the dark entity crumbled under the intensity of our combined resolve, igniting everything around it. Walls pulsed and contorted, shattering the illusion of despair that had held us in its grasp for far too long. That I, in that moment, I felt the chain that had kept me captive fracture and fall away. The spectral shadows around me wailed, churning into a storm, as one by one we broke free, each soul blending with the light rising through the darkness. I could feel the remnants of sorrow fade, the weight of each life intertwining with hope, a tapestry of us escaping to the climb of the unending light, but just as I soared toward the freedom of the welcoming embrace, a vicious chill seized me from behind, forcing me to glance backward. The tower's pulse rumbled beneath my feet, and the darkness surged back, alive and ravenous, vowing that our ordeal was far from over. With fear once more clawing at the edges of my resolve, I was ripped from the beam of light, pulled back into the tower's heart, no longer a singular entity, but now a beacon for all those who craved freedom. The darkness seethed around me, longing for a sacrifice to heal the wounds left behind. And as I fell, the vision of my face stared back at me from the void, whispering my fate. A twisted smile revealed in its features. "You are home, my dear sister," it echoed sweetly, locking me within its embrace once more. As the shadows coiled around me, the final truth shattered my belief: I had never truly escaped. I had become part of the cycle that fed the tower. And with a chilling finality, the darkness whispered, "Welcome back."